Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This is the Science Dispatch podcast. My name is Cameron English. That is Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, Director of Medicine at the American Council on Science and Health. Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein, what's going on?
It's a beautiful day. It's starting to be fall. You're, of course, living in California, so you don't see any actual changes in the leaves, I suspect. Though the dirt maybe gets a little bit more moist.
It's kind of like watching a cat bark is what it's like, because you go outside, the leaves are starting to turn, but it's still 100 degrees outside.
Okay.
So the changes are coming. In the next few weeks, it's going to be cool, and I'm going to go outside and enjoy the beautiful fall air, walk my dogs, take my kids to the park. But it might as well be, July. And I deeply resent it as a lifelong Californian. It offends my...
I understand. Growing up in LA, I can remember the fall, when the palm fronds would turn slightly browner. And then the Christmas decorations would show up. And
Yeah. In California, it's summer, then it's Halloween, and then it's Christmas in the span of about 4.5 weeks. That's how it works.
Without any change in any kind of seasonality.
Yes, indeed. Okay. All right. Well, we're here to win friends and influence people today with an article that Chuck wrote from the website. It's called "From Snake Oil to Social Media: FDA Rule Making Meets Legal Headwinds." Here's the intro, Chuck, and break it down for us. So you write, direct-to-consumer drug ads have long blurred the line between patient empowerment and corporate persuasion, but the FDA is now moving to rein in misleading tactics on TV and social media. However, free speech protections and post-Chevron limits on agency authority are in play. Okay, lots of moving parts here. Give us the gist. What do we need to know?
Okay, so I have to start with my bias. I'm a physician, so I would say I hate direct-to-consumer ads. They serve no useful purpose, I think, from a health perspective. Now, of course, the pharmaceutical companies will disagree on that, but be that as it may. I start the article talking a little bit about the history of direct-to-consumer advertising, and that actually took off in '62 because of thalidomide. And the thalidomide crisis moved the Congress, which had been stalling and thinking and having meetings about drug information. And they decided that you could now write ads, but the ads had to be fair and balanced, and they had to contain complete subscribing information. Now, at this point in the 60s, the only people reading or seeing these ads were physicians. These were not on television. These were in our journals. So it was easy enough to have on one page a nice picture and some engaging text, and on the next page, the entire package insert that the FDA had required. Fast forward until the late 80s and 90s, and medical freedom and autonomy started to becoming more of an issue, and pharmaceuticals jumped on this with both feet and said, it's time for us to help in the health wars by educating consumers. And they educated consumers by developing television spots. And it was clear immediately that you could not, in 30 seconds, no matter how fast you were reading, read the entire FDA package insert. So they found a compromise, and the compromise at the time was that you could, in certain specific types of drug ads, which are drug ads where they mention the name of the drug as well as the reason for using it, you could refer people to other sites like Speak to Your Doctor or go to some little-known magazine, and you could get all the prescribing information there. That was the workaround that they worked out with the FDA. And now the FDA is coming back and saying it's time to close this particular loophole. Part of the reason is because of the ubiquity of these direct-to-consumer ads, at least on my media feeds. But I'm a boomer, so I am the prime target for a lot of this. But the other area where this makes a huge difference now is in the world of social media and influencers. And the statistics that are cited by the FDA about why they have to do that, that many of the promotional ads for drugs are not carrying the warnings as required by law, are because these are coming from influencers that are not really running ads as much as they're doing, I guess, infotainment or some variation on the theme. So they want to crack down on the loopholes, which, again, I'm all in favor of getting rid of the ads completely, but that's not going to happen. And so I took a little bit of time and I looked at the case law around it. And the bottom line of the case law is that there is no way on the planet Earth that the FDA is going to shut down pharmaceutical ads. These cases have come before the Supreme Court before, and the Supreme Court has said that unless the government has a compelling reason, commercial speech is free speech, and they may go ahead. Now, the compelling reasons that have been given in the past and that are given by the FDA now are that these ads cause people to be unnecessarily stressed and to spend unnecessary amounts of money on drugs that are basically unnecessary for them. But again, case law has already demonstrated that that's not an argument that the government can make. The government cannot protect us from ourselves in terms of wasting our money. So that's where we are.
Years ago on the show Scrubs, there's an episode where a pharmaceutical rep comes into the hospital and she's trying to pitch their new some heart drug, and she's talking to one of the doctors, and she says, it's the most effective drug on the market, and it only carries side effects including muscle wasting, heart arrhythmias, and anal leakage. And the doctor looks at her and goes, I'm getting 2 out of 3 just from this conversation. And, it's funny, but I think there's an interesting point in there in that there's, like, these drugs, they have, like, in order to get FDA approved, the benefit has to outweigh the risk for the target population. But they still carry very serious side effects because you're talking about molecules that can make major changes to how your heart functions or how you produce cholesterol, whatever.
So they're designed to make major changes.
Right. And that carries serious consequences, often even when it does what you want it to do, sadly, just the way the world is. But I would like you to elaborate on why you were so irritated as a doctor. Did you have patients coming in and going, I saw this new drug about anal warts, and I think it would be great to take? And you're like,
no, that's fine because, hopefully.
So what was as a physician, what was the downside for healthcare?
Maybe it's a variation on the Dr. Google effect. I was reading about this drug and it causes these problems, which I think I now have.
I see.
So, you would have to spend some time separating that out. I have no problem with people having information. My concern is that it's not a level playing field when it comes to understanding and working with the information. I mean, I admit the fact that I am not the sharpest knife in the surgical drawer, but I did go to school for 9 years, which probably should give me some small advantage over somebody that, has their degree in something else. That's all I'm saying. And so that I think was a little bit of a problem. I think that the problem is amplified for the primary care providers when they have the dual problem of moving patients through the system at a steady rate, making sure their patient satisfaction scores are good, and there's nothing more satisfying than when the patient says, can I have this? You say yes, And so I think that there's some of that at play, and I can understand why the primary care doctors are offended that that's the case. As a surgeon, it's a little bit of a different world. Nobody's, as I've said many times before, nobody rushes in and say, please operate on me. And if they do, those are not people you want to operate on. So, the other thing that I thought was funny about this whole thing is that there was the Chevron decision, which is a decision that says that regulatory agencies can only act within a certain scope as outlined by the mandate they are given by Congress. has been passed back and forth between the liberals and the conservatives for many years. And last year, the Supreme Court said that the Chevron decision no longer applied and that regulatory agencies were bound simply to what the Congress had said that they could do. They could not define and redefine what Congress had meant. That was up to Congress or the courts to decide. And this was taken as a great victory for conservatives. And we just have to fast forward 9 months later, and this conservative desire to get rid of direct-to-consumer ads, which, by the way, I still say we should do, and I'm not necessarily conservative, is running right up against Chevron, because all the things that are being proposed by the FDA are going to be seen as regulatory overreach by the pharmaceutical companies. 2 days after they announce the regulations, they will be in court saying that it's overreach.
So what's interesting is the Chevron decision came down, I think, before Kennedy signed on as on Team Trump, right? So in other words, he brought a shift in priorities very subtly initially that I think most of the critics of Chevron, myself included, didn't anticipate, right? Because I was actually quite satisfied with the decision, if I'm being completely honest. But you make an interesting point. There's an irony here that, yay-hoo, no more regulators telling us how many fish we can catch. And now it's like, but now we want to use the power, and what do we do? Right? There's this, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So I mean, when I maybe I have this very naive approach. I thought that if you had good faith regulators, they could walk the proper line. And I think that there's a lot of screaming back and forth between both sides about the intent of the regulators, depending on what regulation it is. But Chevron, I think we're going to be back revisiting that, because there's got to be some. Given our Congress is not going to be able to make these kind of rules. The Congress can't even pass a budget. So,
couldn't you have, and maybe this is something to explore on another day, couldn't you have physicians lobby FDA? I mean, AMA has a lot of influence in Washington, so does the American Academy of Pediatrics. Couldn't you have these groups go to Congress and say, here's the kind of law you need to make, legislate in this way so FDA can do X, Y, and Z? Is that possible, or is it just not politically practical?
I think it's not legally possible at this point, unless you take some of this case law, which I go into more detail in the article, and address, because the Supreme Court, so it's already been up to the Supremes, has said that the government can only stop speech which is misleading or lies. And they have other tests and requirements if they wish to go beyond that. And the first one is does the government have a good reason to do this? And the arguments that have been made in the past, as I said, are the arguments that are being made now, that these ads increase unnecessary utilization. And the Supreme Court has said that is not a reason for doing that. And so I think that they're kind of stuck. The only other way to get it is by having the regulators do what the FDA is proposing and say, well, now these rules also apply to influencers, and these also apply to social media, which is fine, except Congress actually is going to have to say that first, not the regulators. Because when the regulators say it, it's a Chevron problem.
This isn't an original thought, and neither is it particularly profound, but I think it's true, is that our regulatory apparatus, it's designed for the 20th century. It's designed for 1972, right? It's designed for when TV was the primary vehicle for getting information to people, or newspapers or whatever. And in the digital landscape, that's just not the reality anymore. So none of the laws, none of the regulations were written with, a TikTok influencer talking about the off-label effects of ivermectin or whatever the drug is, And so we're playing catch up, right? And I don't know that we can catch up. It doesn't seem to me that there's a way to get this giant government machinery to function as versatilely as you would need it to deal with TikTok and Instagram, unless, as you were saying, there's this enormous power we're going to grant to FDA or whomever, DOJ, I don't know if it's a criminal matter, to fix it. I just don't. Am I wrong? Is there a way to adjust this?
I have a slightly different take on it. Is that I think that when legislators have come to an impasse and have a hard problem to resolve, they don't spend the necessary time to come to a meaningful consensus. And what they've all gone back to is, because we can't do that, we'll come up with a very careful process by which we can further codify our intents. And if you look at the huge number of cases going to court, it's not over the basic thing, should we pollute? No, we shouldn't pollute. Okay? We can fight about which chemicals we want to talk about, but it is a generalization for society. You don't want to pollute. But we've created such an arcane system of procedures that all the fighting about various pollution controls comes down to, did you notify the community in time? Did they have adequate time to respond? Did you respond properly to that? It's all procedural. The substantive arguments are therefore put in the background and never addressed. This is straightforward. We can just say, we don't want to have direct-to-consumer advertising because we don't think it's of any value. But that horse has unfortunately left the barn, at least as far as the court's gone, unless they're going to change their minds.
Yeah, fascinating stuff. There's so much more to say. It sounds like we have sort of the vestiges of like a dedicated First Amendment, but it's so inconsistently enforced, and there's so many complications and technicalities that it sort of comes out as this sloppy, like, free speech. You're like, well, I mean, sort of. If you're selling a cancer drug, then maybe there's more to it than, your opinion about voting or whatever.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. And when you look at the social media world, I mean, that's just another Wild West where, it's fine for somebody to have an opinion. This drug worked for me. That's good. That's a good anecdotal story. But when it's multiplied to 18 million people, that may have other repercussions. And then when you discover later on that the influencer got $10,000 from another corporation for talking about this, it adds another layer.
Fun stuff. Yep. I just think the world's too big and too interconnected. We're just not wired for it. And it's going to be decades, maybe longer, before we fully... I don't know. I don't think we ever will. I just think the system's too big and too bloated. And yeah. So there you go. As we always say, the old cliche at this point, problem solved. You're welcome, everyone. We're happy we could bring that to a conclusion for you. Any parting thoughts, Chuck? What should you do? Maybe start with or end with this. As a responsible consumer of medicines and pharmaceutical products, what should you do? Is that advice? Talk to your doctor. Is that really the best thing?
Talk to your doctor. That's okay. For any number of the topics that we come to. Have a conversation with a health professional that has your interests at heart. Very good. The guy that went to school, the gal that went to school for 9 years knows more than you, and has a legal interest in making sure that you don't die. There's what's referred to as a fiduciary responsibility. There you go. We are fiduciaries. We are responsible to give you the best advice on your behalf, not ours. Well, I understand sometimes that may be a little bit hard, but that is the oath we take. All right. Well, once again, the article is called From Snake Oil to Social Media, FDA Rulemaking Meets Legal Headwinds. That's by Dr. Chuck Dinnerstein. That is on acsh.org. When you're there, click the subscribe tab, type in your email address. We'll send you the stories that we publish. The ones you read are the ones we talk about, usually. Follow us on social media. It's at ACSH.org on X, Matter of Facts on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Our colleague Anna Delaski puts out weekly videos tackling all your science and health questions. This week, we're talking about the flu vaccine and some other controversial issues. Go subscribe, go like the videos, and you'll learn some stuff along the way. Thank you so much. See you next time.